Oh, yeah, it is the Sixers Talk podcast brought to you by Wilmington University, Wilmu Works, Danny Pommells, Noah Levick, and Ben Barry, all in the flesh, waiting to talk some Sixers basketball. James Harden, the topic du jour, as he's pulling a step back, and many thought that he would opt out and enter free agency and decline his $35.6 million player option, gentlemen. But instead of entering free agency, he is now opting in to his last season with the Philadelphia 76ers. And apparently he's opting in an effort to seek a trade to a contending team. I guess this contending team, the Sixers, weren't enough for him. But this really caught me off guard. Noah, let's start with you. I'm sure you probably had a different idea of how this would happen, but give us your thoughts on when the Woj bomb broke, or the Shams Charania, whoever broke it, to give you the information, depending on where you get your sources. It seems like Woj had it first, but what did you make of it, and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's pretty huge, pretty dramatic, and in all honesty, I think pretty surprising. I don't think folks saw this coming, and I think sure we knew, and like as I'd said, I'd been told that the Sixers did not think that a long-term big money deal for James Harden made sense. Yet you knew the history with Daryl Morey, and you figured they could come to common ground, especially as things developed with the Houston Rockets. And we heard that Fred VanVleet was a strong possibility for them. They even drafted a point guard in one of the Thompson twins, Amen Thompson. So you thought, okay, Houston is out of the mix, and it might take a little while for James Harden to figure out that new deal with the Sixers, but logically that seemed quite probable. Yet time kept ticking, and the deadline for him to decide on this option neared, and we got a very, very high drama outcome here. So, as he said, the Sixers right now are fielding calls and trying to see if there's a good deal they can make for James Harden. But my understanding is it's not 100% guaranteed that he never plays a game for the Sixers again necessarily. And I think, kind of ironically, you look to the history of the Ben Simmons saga and recognize that Daryl Morey is not an executive who likes to part with players without letting negotiations develop and seeing if he can get the best possible value for his team. But yeah, initial reaction is just, man, this is a big deal with the Sixers yet again. And the outcome of these trade talks is going to be really, really important. I think it does clarify, in all likelihood, that Tyrese Maxey becomes even more important for this team, and his development remains a huge storyline. And just whether they're able to come out okay in these trade talks and find a deal that allows them to pivot and put some good pieces around Joel Embiid while he's still in his prime, obviously of immense importance here, and will be fascinating how it all plays out. But yeah, I think for the most part, even the most plugged in people saw this as a pretty significant surprise, just because all of the pieces seem to be aligning with some sort of deal that brought James Harden back to Philadelphia. But yeah, now he has opted in, but it does seem quite likely that he starts next season on a team that is not the Sixers.
Ben, it seemed like the market just wasn't there for Harden, not only here with the 76ers for a long-term deal or multi-year deal, but the NBA market just wasn't there for him to get that big free agent contract that he was looking for. So I'm sure you can give your thoughts on, when you heard about Harden opting in, but I'm trying to figure out why, if he does opt in, there's also a trade, mutual trade seeking between both sides. Why not just stay here and contend with the team that you forced a trade to from Brooklyn?
So my thoughts are, one, my initial reaction was I laughed. I could do nothing but laugh. It's comical to me to see someone play that way and towards the end of game 6, throughout game 7, and requested trade, forced his way out of 2 teams, and looking to do it for a 3rd time. And I know a lot of things go into it, but I just laugh, coaches being fired, whether it was his preference of the coach or whatever. And the group chat I'm in, it was confusing. No one could really understand why opt in and force a trade unless there's just wasn't a market there for him. But I've always been someone, when the players are in free agency or they're demanding a trade, and I want this, whether it's basketball, football, baseball, no matter what it is. I've always said it only takes one team. It takes one owner, one GM to think we can make it work here. And for the fact that it seems like maybe he didn't think he could get that out there, it's a little surprising. I don't think everyone is as cynical as me or as down as on James Harden as me. You would think there'd be at least one team. And before we started the pod, I threw out some ideas, and it doesn't work because of the money for possible trade straight up. But as comical as this is, because I could just laugh through the pain, I would say the bright spot is, at least I'm hoping the Sixers puts the ball in Tyrese Maxey's hand. Let's see what the young kid is made of. We know he's a great player. Can he make that nuts jump to be an all-star player, perennial all-star player, not just once, but every year a possible all-star player? Because the way the team is constructed, with the lack of assets and money tied up, for them to take the next step until money frees up, Tyrese Maxey has to jump to the next level. So I'm hoping we can see that this year.
Yeah, and for him to jump to the next level, you can't have a dude like James Harden dribbling the ball and controlling the pace and dominating the basketball as much as he is. So, yes, getting rid of Harden would give Maxey opportunity, but we also saw Maxey play really well off the ball, really good with catch and shoot threes. We saw him obviously he did not quite the playmaker James Harden is with the ball in his hand, a guy leading the league in assists and whatnot. But let's try to make sense of that, because if they're going to find out what Maxey is and if he can be the point guard, then you have to give him an opportunity to do so and kind of make mistakes and grow in a position. And you can also not bring in other point guards to replace James Harden in that same ilk. So all these guys that they're speculated and rumored to be connected to, or possible, trade partners with, Lillard or Kyrie or, any other point guards out there. Jalen Brunson was rumors with the Knicks, have been speculated as a trade partner. You can't bring in another point guard and want Maxey to develop and be an all-star. So I just want to put that out there as far as connecting the dots a little bit. Like, I'm sure you guys agree, like, if you're going to preview or give Maxey a chance to take over the role, then you got to give him the ball and not bring in another ball dominant guard who's going to demand to have it in their hands or need to have it in their hands to produce.
Yeah, I mean, I would say we've seen reputable reporting that the Clippers are a strong possibility, and I think there are certainly names on that roster that make sense.
Who is it? Paul George, Kawhi?
No, so I think that next tier of guys. So I think Norman Powell, Terrence Mann, Robert Covington, Marcus Morris, those sorts of role players, I think would check some of those boxes you're looking for in terms of not needing the ball an extraordinary amount and being strong complementary role players. Norman Powell, of course, has been coached by Nick Nurse before, won a title with him in Toronto, and is a pretty excellent offensive player, 40%-ish, three-point shooter, draws a lot of free throws, can lead a second unit at a high level. And I'm personally like a huge fan of Terrence Mann's game. I think he's just a really selfless, versatile player who can, I think, be excellent next to the sort of ball-dominant guys like Joel Embiid or perhaps Tyrese Maxey, great guard rebounder, just a gamer, guard stars, and is up for those sort of challenges as well.
With that in mind, not to interrupt you, Noah. So you're losing a guy theoretically in Harden who potential all-star, assist leader, former scoring champ, all those assets, 10-time all-star, all those things that come with Harden. Do you feel like getting younger and kind of the sum of the parts with, not getting an all-star in return is maybe a formula that can get the Sixers to that Eastern Conference or NBA Finals appearance? So you're building up the pieces around Joel Embiid rather than going with one, big name star player. Did you see a path there to get them, kind of over the hump with that type of approach?
I think it's possible. I think you really need to nail the specifics and be savvy if we are talking about a deal that nets you multiple role players or multiple non-star players. But to me, the guys I just mentioned, that's not an outlandish thought, I think, especially if Tyrese Maxey does continue to improve. But obviously, there are two sides to these negotiations, and the Clippers won't want to part with players they value highly and have seen excel next to Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. But that prospect to me, I think, sounds logical and somewhat realistic in all honesty, because other teams also saw what Ben mentioned, that James Harden failed yet again, right, in some big games and is entering his mid-30s and had injuries last season again. So I think all of that is stuff that other teams are aware of. They're not oblivious to that. And the Sixers are not in a position like with Ben Simmons where they can say there are a bunch of years left on this contract and, this guy is perhaps even going to improve over time. Not like James Harden is a known quantity for better and for worse. And it's a one-season proposition for a contender. So I think absolutely with the Clippers, they can tell themselves that getting James Harden next to two stars can vault them to, tier A. But the reality is that James Harden is a flawed star, and everyone understands that. And that's a factor the Sixers have to, I guess, work around in these negotiations and do as well as they can. And, as I noted, they are not obligated to trade him. Obviously, that seems like where this is headed, and they are heavily considering these offers, but he has opted in, he's under contract, and Daryl Morey is not at all opposed to making things very uncomfortable. So seems like that's a possibility here that this does drag out for a while.
Although he did opt in, and James Harden has no problem making things uncomfortable. We've seen that in Brooklyn. We've seen it in Houston. I lean on when a player is mentally already checked out and has zero desire to be there, it might be best to move them before to start training camp and before you get games underway, because I haven't seen much benefit. And for people to believe in distractions, which I don't, I think everyone has distractions in life, home life and everything. But do you really just want that energy around the team? There's no benefit from it. I thought that Daryl Morey should have traded Ben Simmons ASAP. There was no point in bringing him back in training camp. And they held out for James Harden. James Harden wants out. A year and a half of James Harden, season and a half. And I know a lot of people will push back and can't just bow down to the players. I don't think it's bow down to the players as much as trying to get people in that want to be there, building a cohesive unit.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point. I even agree with it, I think, more strongly than in the Simmons situation, because whereas Ben Simmons had 4 years left on that contract, James Harden, it's 1 year. So I think with Simmons, the stakes were very high to do your best to make that trade a strong one. I think the same is true with Harden, but the reality is it's a 1 year deal, and we have pretty recent evidence that if he doesn't love the idea of being in a situation, he can make it pretty messy.
Wear pillows under his clothes, and
yeah, I think it was a tense time there in Houston for a while. So the Sixers don't have to do something in a technical sense, but I fully agree. There's some degree of time urgency here, and I think Daryl Morey is going to be somewhat realistic about that, you would think.
Is James Harden the type of guy that you don't want on your team? Like, in essence, he's forced his way out of two. Houston, the situation was deteriorating. He didn't want to be a part of a rebuild. He forced his way out and actually ended up in a really favorable situation, a situation he really wanted to be in, playing with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Whatever happened between him and Kyrie, that situation deteriorated, and he forced his way into being traded to Philadelphia. And here this situation is deteriorating, and so much so that, and obviously there's all the baggage that comes with Harden, with the on the court stuff and some of the off the court stuff, and how he likes to do things, and when he likes to speak to the media or not, or the marching orders that he likes to go by. So I'm really just asking the question: is this a big blemish on his his record, his history? Like, does it really not work in his favor for him to be going to another team under these circumstances? And the guy who will be 34 to start next season has the pressure of performing with this next team to finally get to that championship appearance that he's been trying to reach over these 14 NBA seasons. So, like, make it make sense to me. Do you guys feel like he's a guy that you wouldn't want on your team? Is that partly the reason why the market hasn't developed for him? Because, once again, people have seen the things that have transpired in previous stops for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think each team is going to have their own answers to that. I personally don't see him as like a toxic presence on a team or anything along those lines. I think he has a pretty low-key personality, and my sense from covering him and talking with his teammates is pretty chill, normal dude. And I think, yes, he's known for the fashionable statements and being a little, star-like in that sense. But I don't think at all the frequent changing of teams in recent years indicates anything about his fundamental character or personality.
Do you just take those two, what happened in Houston with, we heard John Wall talk about when he was traded to Houston and going to his opening press conference that he called Harden, and Harden was on his way to the Little Baby concert in Atlanta, not, already checked out of the Houston situation. And we saw the way things deteriorated in Boston. And, here's a third stop where it hasn't worked out. But are you just taking that stuff in a vacuum and, giving him the benefit of the doubt? Or do you feel like that's more of a calling card?
No, I think, probably at this point it is somewhat defining of his NBA career that he had the long, successful stint in Houston, and then ever since then hasn't found sustained satisfaction. And I do think at this point understands there probably aren't many high-level years left, and really wants that title to change the way people feel about him when it comes to the playoff failures. So I do think there's nuance to it, though. I don't want to go as far as saying just because he's preferred other destinations in recent years and made things tricky or uncomfortable on his teams at times that he's a bad person or that reflects on his character on a deep level. I do think he really, really loves basketball. That's been consistent. And when he's engaged and motivated to be on a team, he's someone guys like being around, and still, of course, very, very talented and loves setting his teammates up. Literally led the NBA in assists last year. So I certainly understand that, some of the recent decision making could lead to people seeing him as selfish in X or Y way. And I get that, but I think, we're all multifaceted people, and that's definitely the case for James Harden. I mean, this mini saga this summer just feels to me like there's been a lot of genuine indecisiveness. I think we discussed that a bit before, and he had the notion that perhaps he'd return to Houston. Now it's sounding like Fred VanVleet very well may be the next point guard of that team. And I hear what you're saying about the lack of a market for him, but Houston is the team with tons of cap space. Doesn't sound like they saw fit to use that on a long-term big money deal for James Harden. And then the other possibilities, I think, were pretty slim in terms of opt out, then sign elsewhere. So, from the Sixers' perspective, I do think that would have not been great, just to have James Harden, quote unquote, walk in free agency. Now it appears there's at least an opportunity to deal him, and they'll do their best in that deal.
So, Danny, restate your question for the listeners or viewers on YouTube.
Listen, the question is James Harden the type of player that you don't want on your team, considering the way he left Houston and all the nonsense?
Just stop you right there. You don't even need to go into it anymore. Just stop.
Yeah.
Is James Harden a player you want on your team? So, May 16th, this tweet by Bill Simmons from The Ringer.
Mm-hmm.
If you had to name one NBA superstar in history who consistently came up short in the playoffs, 2, quit on multiple teams, 3, consistently showed a lack of accountability, 4, got the most coaches' teammates either fired or traded, who's the first guy that comes to mind?
Did he say James Harden?
He did not. It's wild to look at the response.
He checks a lot of those boxes.
Yeah,
I don't know if he got guys fired necessarily.
I mean, he didn't help Nash. There's a lot of people that think he's the reason that Doc's gone. I think Kevin McHale was done with him in Houston. I'm not saying he got those guys fired. What I'm saying
that just sounds like diva behavior in some instances. Like
so you got those diva behaviors, and like he's 32, 33. He's been in the league long enough. Yeah. It's not a small sample size anymore.
No, not at all. That's why I'm asking the question, because it's like
we showed up small in the finals with OKC. Thought, oh, he's young. Like it maybe nerves. Big finals, first time, all eyes. Happened multiple times in Houston. It's happened in 2 playoff runs here in Philly. Wasn't healthy in Brooklyn. At a certain point in time, like it's just that's who you are. It doesn't make you a horrible person or anything like that. And it's some words that some analysts or writers or people around the world to use to describe players like that might be over the top. But he's not the guy. And at this point, you're going to pay a lot of money for a regular season performance when we've seen at this point in time, big games, he's not going to show up. He's not going to play his best. And why pay that much money for someone that's not going to play their best in the postseason? And we're talking about James Harden. We're going to get to this conversation sooner or later with Joel Embiid because his playoffs numbers, the greats, they go up to another level. People talk about Mamba mentality. Kobe Bryant. We see Jimmy Butler have been doing it. Giannis, Jokic's done it this year. The greatest, Michael Jordan's done it. Embiid, his number, his points per game dropped. His field goal percentage dropped. I'm not crazy about having guys like Embiid, his career. Yes, he's been in the league 9 years at this point. Maybe he can turn it around. Harden, I don't think he's the guy to turn it around.
I'm going to take a time out here. I have something I want to say, but I feel like we need to pay some bills. We're deep into the podcast and haven't acknowledged our sponsors. So yes, Ben, we will start with Wilmington University, of course. And Wilmington University and students are in the game, upskill in fields like cybersecurity, fintech, healthcare, and education, in person or online. Get in the game at Wilmington University. Find us at wilmu.edu. One of our favorite places to visit, it is Rivers Casino, and it is time to rush to new rewards at Rivers Casino. Now there's a whole new way for you to earn, redeem, and level up your rewards. Get your new Rush Rewards card and get more out of your game at Rivers Casino, Philadelphia. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. You are who the mirror says you are, right? And for Harden, the things that when he looks in the mirror that reflect back on him are a lot of those things you mentioned. From interacting with him and seeing him on the court and the way players respond to him, I think people enjoy playing with him, but the results aren't always, favorable. Here the Sixers are, though, with 2 tradable assets in Harden and Tobias Harris. For some reason, Harden's time here has come to an end, and they're seeking a trade. And regardless, though, of what happens this season and how the trade turns out, I think that they won the Ben Simmons trade, even though Harden has only been here roughly 2 years. I think that the way Ben Simmons had the team handcuffed and all of the, scuttlebutt in the media and the back and forth and stuff like that, Harden was a viable asset that came to the team with a skill set that they could use to try to win games where they didn't have that with Simmons. So I don't begrudge or regret trading for Harden. I just wish that it was a better version of James, and that's just the nature of the beast from it being, later in his career. But
so
as far as the trade, I'm good with it. And I'm sure that they'll try to leverage what Harden is and get assets in return, and we'll be judged on that. But as far as everything that's happened to this point, I think the Sixers made the right move.
Is it possible that both teams lost the trade?
I don't think so, because the Brooklyn Nets lost so much. They lost in the trade for Harden and acquiring Simmons. Like, they got none of what they expected and are still.
They didn't get anything what they expected. So yes, they lost the trade. Sixers. It was the rumors. It was the Tyrese Halliburton deal that was out there. That rumor was out there. The De'Aaron Fox deal was out there. Both younger guys could have paired with Maxey. De'Aaron Fox and Maxey would have been a small backcourt. But Harden was here for a season and a half. Still didn't get past the second round. He's opting in, but he wants to be traded somewhere else.
I don't know if Halliburton or Fox would have gotten them to where you're saying, and I don't know if that would have helped Maxey's development. Either of those guys, maybe Halliburton more, but
I think Halliburton would have been better to pair with Maxey for the size aspect of it, not to have a too small guard backcourt. We've seen where that gets you with CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard, both good players, one great player. But just because you got Harden for a year and a half and Ben Simmons wasn't playing, you maybe got the better of the deal, but I don't think it means they actually won the trade.
Doesn't mean they lost, though.
If you don't win, you lose.
That's not how this works, though.
That's life.
It's not the win and loss.
Danny, you're a father. You play sports. If you don't win the championship, what are you?
But this is a trade. It's not like a winner.
And the trade was to get them to the next level.
So if they trade Harden and end up getting assets in the back that helped them get to the next level, did they still lose the trade?
So what assets are they getting back?
We're going to find out.
You think they're going to get good assets back?
Well, think about it. If they're trading Harden and facilitating a 3-team deal or receiving draft picks back in return, those things can then be shipped to acquire a player as well.
Danny, you get a check from the Sixers. You sound like Mr. PR guy right now.
I'm talking about the fact that they won the Ben Simmons and James Harden trade. It's not hard to admit or see a path toward that.
I think both teams lost. That's it.
That's okay. You could be wrong too.
I'm right. Both teams lost.
I guess it's a whole deal where we're trying to define what counts as a win. But I do think Ben said the Sixers did better in the deal, and I think many would consider that a win if we're trying to play with the semantics there. Look, Ben Simmons has not spent much healthy time on a basketball court. He was the centerpiece of that trade. And, unfortunately for the Nets, the other pieces they acquired have not been super productive either. I think Seth Curry has not given the Nets what the Sixers got. And then Andre Drummond had a brief stint there. The draft picks, I guess, are the main asset acquired in addition to Ben Simmons, besides those two role players. And look, James Harden absolutely was not good enough in the playoffs. No debating that. He did single-handedly win them 2 games in this series against the Boston Celtics, and then was pretty disappointing in the 4 games they lost. So I think it's a mixed bag. I don't think it was a total failure from him this postseason, but sure, absolutely inadequate if we're talking about getting to that next level. And I think, there are many ways we can look back at the hypotheticals. I know there's been conflicting reports about whether Halliburton was indeed attainable for the Sixers. I do think, to the big guard point, James Harden, 6'5", pretty sturdy in the post. And in my mind, that's actually a factor the Sixers should consider here in these discussions, because absolutely, Tyrese Maxey is legitimately undersized, and it would sure be nice if, should James Harden depart, the team, do a decent job of picking up like solid, sturdy, versatile defenders at the guard spot. I do think that'll be important. But yeah, as far as relitigating the deal, I guess there are many ways you can do that. I think certainly the Brooklyn Nets don't look like they have won that trade, and the Sixers, for their time being, don't look like they're super satisfied with how things have played out. But this next trade that seems likely to occur is also, I think, very important in how we look back on all of this, in 5-10 years.
So Harden and Tobias Harris, very viable, tradable assets the Sixers have. Are they in a better position now because Harden has opted in and requested a trade? Are they in a better position with these two assets and there are chances to trade them now or later than they would be if Harden if they had worked out a deal with Harden and decided, they were going to bring him back? Do you feel like they're in a better position now than they would be if Harden had decided to stay and both sides agreed to that?
I think the terms of that deal would have been really important. I think, a 4-year max contract deal like that's a clear no. That wouldn't have been good for the Sixers. I think if James Harden had, again, done something that was legitimately team friendly in terms of the dollars, then, as we discussed, he did make Tyrese Maxey better in quite a few ways. And he did form a really dynamic pick and roll partnership with Joel Embiid. The Sixers, did have their most wins since 2001. So
and he already gave them a team friendly deal the previous offseason. So that probably also, along with the 4-year deal, is probably on the other end of the extreme.
Exactly. So, yeah. As we said, I think that just didn't seem like it was going to happen this time around. And I think certainly they're in a better spot than if James Harden had just straight up, gone to the Houston Rockets and not opted in, or if he had, signed just outright with some other team. And I think it's still TBD whether him opting in and likely getting traded is the optimal outcome for the Sixers. I think, it's very possible he could have signed yet again, a 1-year plus player option or 2-year plus player option deal for like a moderate to high cost, like a moderate overpay. And that would have worked, right? If he just had a really great year and he had one more year left of elite production. But I think that wouldn't have been a sure thing. There would have been, I think, reasons for optimism, reasons for pessimism. And I think that's all still true. I think there's just a ton still up in the air in terms of like how the Sixers made out with this whole saga. But just him not signing outright with the Houston Rockets, to me, that's an unequivocal thumbs up, because the Sixers were not positioned, given Joel Embiid's about to start this Supermax deal and Tobias Harris has this big contract, to be players for the big names in free agency that could have replaced Harden's production adequately. I think now at least there's the potential to use him in a trade and do better than they would have in that hypothetical, free agency scenario. So, to me, it's all very still up in the air, and I think you can't really give too many firm answers to that question unless you're dealing in the hypothetical extremes.
It's what Noah said. I'm gonna echo what Noah said. It's definitely a benefit that Harden decided to opt in, and you can trade and receive something back.
The market must have been bad, bro. The market must have been horrible for him to opt in.
It was the rumors that he wanted to go back to Houston, but it seems like Houston is really big on not spending a lot and focusing on their young core and grooming them to help them build and be good players moving forward. Not exactly sure if James Harden was the guy to help them become take the next step or improve, become solid, good NBA players. Sixers can get something back for Harden now in the trade, which is a plus compared to just letting him walk. But as Noah said, don't know what you're going to get back. So it's a lot of what if, hypothetical, until we know what they're going to get back, as well as a potential trade for Toby. So until then, just like I'm thankful that they're able to get something back.
Yeah, definitely. Because it's not even like they could have used the money that they would have freed up if Harden signed somewhere else. Like they don't just get dollar for dollar back to like go use that to sign some other free agents. So they were really handcuffed in a lot of ways. No draft picks. They'd sign a few undrafted guys after the draft to two-way deals, but I feel like they're definitely in a better situation with him opting in, and we'll wait and see how it plays out. Hopefully Daryl Morey can earn his pay. A couple other points before we get out of here. A lot of teams are rumored to be connected to a potential Harden trade or suitors for Harden. Depends on who you believe, but we've heard the Knicks, the Clippers, the Heat, the Suns. We've heard that the Suns and Terrell Harris, Tobias's dad, felt like the Sixers, aren't using Tobias the right way or negotiating in good faith. He could have been going to the Suns. So I'm just asking, which teams do you think are viable options? The Sixers, according to the reporting, are going to cast a wide net to see who out there can play a part in, the Sixers trading James Harden. But are there scenarios, teams, Clippers and Knicks seem to be at the forefront of the suitors, but do you feel like there's a perfect or more dynamite scenario that will work out for the Sixers to trade Harden?
Clippers, I think this feels like it's the right spot, and yeah, I mean, it'll be tricky in terms of the Clippers having a lot of money on their books and also having a few young players that they like, and those negotiations, might not end swiftly, as I said, but to me, out of the teams potentially in the mix, that's the standout, by far, I think. So I would not at all be surprised if James Harden ends up going back to his hometown of Los Angeles. So that honestly, to me, would be a pretty expected outcome here.
I think the Clippers, it seems like the most viable option right now with this news coming out only a few hours ago. I think there could be a couple of sleeper teams that we're not thinking of, but I still don't see a lot outside. I don't see any team outside of the Clippers that make a lot of sense for them per se. Like the Lakers definitely out. I mean, the Suns, I don't see that happening.
They just traded for Bradley Beal. That would
be
weird.
You're going to have what? That'd be 5 guys on a very high end contracts or nearly high end. Unless I guess they would have to move DeAndre Ayton, but you don't have DeAndre Ayton and B playing at the same time, or have a high praise center coming off the bench. We kind of had a similar role like that only a few years ago, and that was a disaster. So I really don't see what any other options besides the Clippers, but it could be someone waiting in the wings, waiting in the shadows, and surprise us at the end of the day.
Yeah, Daryl Morey has definitely caught us off guard in the past with the Al Horford deal, Josh Richardson trade, of course, acquiring Seth Curry in that, who was a darling to many fans here in Philadelphia. So I think Morey deserves the benefit of the doubt, and he showed that he can hold his water in the Ben Simmons negotiation and drama. So I feel like like Noah said, this could bleed into, a longer process than many people would hope. One last thing before we get out of here, Noah, the Sixers have hired a few more assistant coaches, a few names that we may know or not know. Instead of going through all of them, is there a player of the new hires that you feel like fans should be paying attention to?
Yeah, definitely. Fabulous Flournoy has joined the Sixers, come over with Nick Nurse ultimately from Toronto. pretty fantastic name. Goes by Fab for short, and just has an incredible story. He's a New York native and was recruited, I think, a year out of college. Was working at the Gap, and Nick Nurse brought him over to join his team in the British Basketball League, and Fab became a legend there. He played for 20 plus years into his mid 40s and was a player coach for much of that time. So just this extraordinary character, known for being a real hard worker with like a ton of natural curiosity and desire for self-improvement, and also to help his players become better versions of themselves. So as I said, Nick Nurse, I think, has an affinity for some outside of the box characters, and Flournoy, I think, would meet that description. And I think he's an interesting player development / assistant coach now that the Sixers will have on their staff. I think it never hurts to have some of those different perspectives, and he will provide that for this team. So Nurse bringing over several guys that he has history with, and Flournoy, would be the standout of that bunch for me.
Check out Noah Levick's work on NBC Sports Philadelphia.com. For Ben Berry, I'm Danny Pommells, and Noah, thank you for listening to the Sixers Talk podcast. Hey, we will be here with you every step of the way as this drama continues to unfold. It seems 76ers just cannot avoid it. And hopefully all this culminates in some winning basketball, but we will see. Thank you for listening. We're brought to you by Wilmington University. WilmU Works. This has been the Sixers Talk podcast. We'll see you next time.